Today we'll be looking at a Solus 60 open lifeboat and its associated davit structure. This will be part of the survival craft davit and appurtenances. We'll identify some hazards with this set of machinery here. There's a lot of very, very heavy things that are under a lot of stress, a lot of strain. A lot of things can hurt you. Pinch points, slips, trips, and falls are all something that you very much need to take into account for not only yourself, but the vessel's crew. It's very, very important. It'll be standard PPE for this. You need a hard hat and the rest of the gear that you would normally utilize for this inspection. Part of your inspection of the survival craft davit and appurtenances is going to be lighting for the area that the lifeboats and life rafts are in. It's very important that the crew has enough light to see what they're doing should they have to launch the lifeboats or life rafts. Here we have an excellent example of the emergency lighting arrangement. You need to provide lighting both for the loading and embarkation area and over the side of the ship. One thing that you'll see oftentimes, especially on older boats, is you'll have corrosion buildup, which may lead to the lighting not being able to move as it's intended to be able to rotate from the embarkation area overboard. The next thing we'll look at is your lifeboat launch procedures, or your survival craft launching procedures. It should be simple to understand and posted near to the equipment that it's intended to serve. You'll have your IMO symbology here, and like I said, very simple instructions on how to make it happen in an emergency. Your crew may or may not be running real fast, having a really stressful day. They should be able to understand quickly how to get the survival craft into the water. The next portion of our inspection of the davit and supporting structure is the sheaves. There are sheaves all over the place on this, and the intention is to allow the fall to pass through certain points, structural points, without excess wear on the fall. These sheaves are intended to turn while the equipment is in motion. That's one thing to look at while the equipment is going overboard, is to make sure that the sheaves are all turning as they're supposed to. Very important, they'll all have a grease zerk, and it's important to make sure that it appears that they're being maintained properly and that the structure that supports the sheave is in good condition. Here's another example of one a little bit higher on the structure there. Every one of these needs attention. You need to ensure that the material condition of it is okay, that it appears that they're hitting those grease points, and that they're all turning. If they don't turn, it can cause a flat point in the fall as the fall runs over the top of it, which may cause failure of the fall and some bigger problems there at that point. One of the critical components of a life-saving system that uses davits to launch is the falls. Without the falls, there's really not a great way to run the thing. Now, these are just wires, is all they are. They're steel wires, and they may be greased, they may not be greased. They could be some form of stainless. What's very important about these is that these wires remain in good condition. If the wires start to break, if they have individual strands begin to part out, that will reduce the strength of the fall wire. Now, this is a very important safety point to make here. When the craft is headed over and everything's moving, do not put your hand around this fall. Not only you run the risk of getting sucked into something, but if the wire has any little hooks, any broken wires, it'll take a hold of your hand and absolutely ruin your day. So look at the condition of the fall, watch for broken portions of the wire, make sure that as the fall goes around the sheaves and the supporting structures, that there's not any obvious damage or deterioration, flat spots on the falls that may develop over the course of time. These are exposed to the weather and take a lot of abuse. And so that's part of their inspections that need to be done. You need to make sure that the fall is physically in good condition. Looking over here, we've got the drums that as the craft is winched back up, the fall is going to be wrapped onto these drums. And you may have one drum, it could have two drums, it depends on the design of the ship. But it's very important to make sure that as it comes back on, that the fall is wrapping around the drum evenly. It should be uniform. It shouldn't be kinked. It shouldn't try to roll around, or you shouldn't have any rat's nests or anything like that. So have a look at that. Make sure that on the inside of the drum or around the drum, same thing with your grease points. Make sure that your fall is properly secured at the end of it. The Davits system is controlled in part by a braking system. You'll have some form of lever that the crew, when they're ready to launch the lifeboat or life raft or whatever it is, you'll have a lever that the crew will lift up on, which will disengage a series of clutches within the gearbox, and that'll allow whatever the craft is to begin making its way down to the water. For the purposes of an annual inspection, if you're doing a lifeboat drill or putting the boat in the water for whatever reason, realistically what you're looking for is basic functionality of the brake. When the crew lifts the brake up, the entire set of equipment should begin moving. Conversely, when they let this brake go, everything should stop. If you get to the point to where the crew member lets it go and the boat keeps headed for the water and they're having to jump on it and do crazy things to try to get it to stop, you have an issue with the braking clutches and potentially the gearbox of the system. Your davit structure may have harbor pins attached. Harbor pins are intended to keep your rescue craft or your lifeboat or your rescue boat, it's supposed to protect it from inadvertent launching. So you'll have some sort of device to basically keep the boat where it is while the ship is in harbor. While they're at sea, they'll take that pin off. This is not quite a harbor pin, but it is a way that they secure this boat. Basically, you'll have a series of levers and straps that keep the boat where it is right up until they're ready to launch. The foundation of your davit structure is one of the most highly stressed components of the entire system, right next to the winch assembly and the falls. All of the stress and the strain and the tens of thousands of pounds of energy that is imparted on the structure of the ship by the movement of the survival craft has to come back down through the foundation. It's very, 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 very important, especially when you're doing load tests, that you have a really good look at the foundation of the structure. In this case, it's all of these welds here, and it's all of the plating and reinforcements below the deck here. When you're doing an inspection, watch for cracks, watch for fractures, watch for wastage in all of the structural steel, not only in the foundation of the actual davit, but look at where the falls connect as well. Look for cracked welds here. This is an incredible amount of tension that is being transferred through the fall, through the sheave, down into the deck. If you wind up with fractures here, there is the possibility that some of these components can lift all the way off of the deck or rip away, which would cause the failure of the system. Every one of these connections is under an incredible amount of stress. And so it's very important when you're doing your assessment of the material condition of the boat that you have a good look for cracks, wastage, any sort of damage, deformation, buckling of the structural members. Any deformation will reduce the maximum capacity of the structure and may put the equipment and the crew at risk. When you witness the operation of the davit, if you are going to launch a lifeboat or a rescue boat for a drill, for example, you want to make sure that when the crew member heads for the brake and he starts lifting on that brake and the entire system starts to move, you want to see the lifeboat or rescue boat evenly make its way over the side. You shouldn't see one side higher or lower than the other. The thing shouldn't shudder. You shouldn't have any adverse reaction. The entire thing should evenly go over smoothly. The boat will likely swing back and forth a little bit and then lower away. Again, you're looking for the condition of the falls, you're watching the sheaves for motion, and the general material condition of the structure. An important safety point. Again, this is a tremendous amount of weight that is moving around. It's very, very important to mind your snapback zones. watch out. If something fails, it will likely fail very quickly. So mind your own safety, mind the safety of the crew. When they begin the process of lifting the boat back up, there's a safety device that prevents the boat from being pulled too hard into the davit structure. There are limit switches. As the davit arm comes back up, your limit switch lever will be in a position similar to this. As the davit arm comes back up, it will push that lever down, which will shut off the electricity to the winch and prevent the falls from being overstretched. In this case, your davit limit switch arm is here, and this here is the physical limit switch. When the davit gets back up into position a little bit before it's in its final stowed position, this limit switch will shut the power off to the motor that runs the winch. So there'll be one of these on both of the davit arms. Very important to verify the operational condition of this limit switch. As you conclude your inspection of the davit structure on a boat, a couple things you might bear in mind. Some tips or unique considerations. Okay? The operation of the davit and the launching of a life-saving craft, it's big, it's heavy, it's stressful on the crew. It's something that you need to very, very, very watch closely. Sorry, man. Okay. As we conclude our inspection of the davit and appurtenances and the life-saving craft, a couple of things that you need to pay attention to, some tips and unique considerations. Safety is very, very important while you're exercising this equipment. There's a lot of stress, there's a lot of strain. The crew is trying to move quickly. You need to be very, very careful. Watch yourself, watch your colleagues, watch the crew. Make sure that they're not going to hurt themselves as you try to launch whatever it is that you're looking to launch. It's very important. We'd rather nobody get hurt than something go wrong. When you look at these things, especially on some of the older ships that may not be taken as well care of, and you're looking at the Zerk fittings, the grease fittings on the sheaves, and of the various different connection points on the davits, look for paint. They should be hitting those grease points very, very routinely to make sure that the equipment is well taken care of. If you look at a grease point and it has 16 layers of paint over it, it's fairly obvious that they haven't been greasing the thing that needs grease, and that may cause a premature failure of the equipment. Another thing that you may see from time to time is a flat failure of the machinery to work. It might not launch. If the crew member goes over and he reaches up, he pulls up on the brake, and nothing happens, they may start getting upset. The crew may start getting worried. They're going through Coast Guard inspection. Don't let the crew come out with sledgehammers and start beating on things and have somebody upstairs kicking on the craft trying to get it to go. Again, you're watching out for the safety of the crew during these operations. If they pull up, if they have done everything that they need to, as they're following the instructions step by step by step through the procedure, and the survival craft does not launch, then you need to expand your examination. Maybe go through some records. When was the last time the equipment was used? Perhaps expand into the safety management system. But absolutely, do not let the crew manhandle the craft overboard because it may severely worsen the situation. As a final point, I can't stress enough, safety and communications during these evolutions is absolutely key. We absolutely want everybody safe, and one of the best ways to do that is to maintain good and close communications through the ships, between yourself and the ship's officers and crew, to make sure that the evolution goes as it's planned. In summary of our inspection of a survival craft davit and appurtenances, we identified hazards, cautions, and PPE required to inspect the survival craft and appurtenances. We verified launching area lighting. We verified that operating instructions were posted. We inspected the material condition of the davit, in particular the sheaves, the falls, the hooks and release gear, the brake, harbor pins, remote lowering device, your foundations and structural attachments. Additionally, we witnessed the operation of the davit and talked about the normal operation of an emergency operation of the Davit and how limit switches work with respect to recovering the survival craft. If you have any questions at all about how to inspect a survival craft davit or any of the equipment associated with that, contact your local verifying officer.